Welcome everyone to the next episode of Keto Chat. I am your host, Carole Freeman, certified nutritionist and some other stuff, blah, blah, blah. I am here today with Kent. Oh man, your last name, Altena? Kent Altena, all the way from Des Moines, Iowa, back where they know how to pronounce those terms correctly. Thank you so much for coming on. I reached out to you because both of us were interviewed on the Keto Hacking MD podcast for a recent high protein experiment that we did. And I had never heard of you or met you before. So I was like, I got to get this guy on so we can figure him out some more. So, well, let me just read your bio here so that people have a, welcome.
Appreciate you having me.
Let me read your bio so people know who you are, and then we'll just dive in and have some fun here. So after getting forced out of the Army National Guard due to his weight and seeing his former squad mates be deployed, Kent Altena lost 211 pounds in 2004 and rejoined the Army National Guard in 2005. He always had a passion for cooking and subsequently started one of the largest low-carb ketogenic cooking channels on YouTube. He has been featured in multiple national magazines for his weight loss and was Atkins Diet Grand Slam champion in 2012 for his community support and weight loss story. However, after starting a new stressful job, he saw a regain happen and added over 100 pounds back. Since rededicating himself to get back to goal September 2017, he has lost the weight and back at goal. Congratulations, Kent, and welcome.
Thank you, Carole.
So, all right, so that's some of your story, but how did you even find low-carb Atkins? So originally you lost the weight when it was still called Atkins, right?
Yes.
So how did you find that? What was your story of figuring that out?
Yeah, so both my brother and I were well over 400 pounds, and at that point, he had started Atkins at the beginning of the year. I said, Tim, you're not going to lose the weight. You're going to just regain it all back. It's not sustainable, blah, blah, blah. Well, It took me about till March to seeing him lose about 60 pounds to say, hey, well, if he can do it, maybe I can too. So after that, April 5th, I think, I started Atkins and really never looked back after that point. So within the next 15 months, I lost that 211 pounds and rejoined the Guard shortly thereafter. So.
Nice. During that time, what were the biggest challenges for you? You made it sound like it was just so easy, but.
The biggest challenge was really back then, there really wasn't any great low-carb cooking channels. Mm-hmm. There was a low-carb website, which is a godsend for anybody starting up a low-carb lifestyle, but there really wasn't a good way to figure out how to cook a lot of those past favorites. So that was the biggest challenge. So kind of figuring out what to make, what sounded interesting, how to stay enthused about the diet, not making it a routine or a grind. That was the hardest part. And then, of course, getting motivated to add the exercise in because, of course, my ultimate goal was to, re-enlist, and I needed to be back in shape to do that. And At the age of 34 at that time, it was harder to get motivated to go out and run, to do the push-ups and the sit-ups and all that. So that was really, those two things were probably the most difficult things.
Okay. Yeah, what a change, right? And that was back when Atkins still was trying to be mindful that, well, saturated fat might be bad, so you should have soybean oil and don't have too much red meat and butter and have margarine instead, right?
Yeah, so that was, I started actually the year after he had passed away. Okay. So that was when the whole Atkins nutritional approach, they really kind of backed away from really, really low carb and going for Atkins for life because they themselves didn't think it might have been sustainable and the science wasn't there at that point. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the quality of food, quality of nutrients really got thrown out the window to try to be more heart healthy, quote unquote. So yes, definitely.
And that, so compare what you were eating back then. Like, I'm just going to say, like, I can only imagine that trying to do Atkins that way, like a heart healthy, low saturated fat version of that, is not as tasty and delicious as the current foods that you're eating, right?
Yeah, so I never really took that approach.
Okay.
I went back to 1972. What was he actually trying to say back then? And I figured what the science back then was appropriate. So, at that point, I needed to lose the weight, and so much maybe the science ended up proving me right as time went on, as opposed to being more heart healthy. What the American Heart Association would have approved, because I figured they were wrong because Dr. Atkins was telling me right. So
yeah, okay, all right. So how did you start your cooking channel?
so so after I had seen all the success, I was part of this low carb forum site on the internet, because Facebook still wasn't hot back then. And really the question was, how do you tell somebody new how to start the diet? And of course, just like it was in my case, food is a big stumbling block. So I got the idea, hey, how do I make this easier for friends and family to start the diet? Well, one was show people how to cook what I was making. So that was really the impetus around the channel. So my first video ever was my Atkins diet success story. Okay. And that one got like 200,000 views within the first year. And I thought, hey, if there's actually people out here looking for that sort of information, might they not also be looking for how to do it? So I had done boot camps in the past through the forum site, in which I would, guide people one by one through how to do the diet and be successful. So I thought YouTube was a great mini-one platform that I could do that similarly. So that was kind of how I did the cooking channel. I've always been the cook in the house, because that's just who my family was. My parents owned a restaurant back then. My grandparents taught me how to cook, etc. So I've always liked to cook. It was a matter of, up until now, cooking the right things was not high on the menu. So
okay.
Atkins gave me a chance to express some creativity in the kitchen and make some of those old former high carb favorites now new low carb convenience or comfort foods. So.
Okay. And then when you started, you talked about how your brother got on board first, and then you came along after seeing his success. Other people in your household then, as you started cooking differently, how did that impact them?
Sorry, my computer went to sleep. So my wife has also lost about 100 or so pounds on the low carb diet as well.
Well, not so shabby.
Sorry, I missed that.
I said not so shabby, huh?
No, exactly. So I'm very, very proud of her, and she's running her own, weight loss journey and becoming a strong man competitor, a strong woman competitor too. So all good things. And then my kids have seen my sort of success and have been featured in my videos from time to time. And from at one point, my son had lost well over 100 pounds as well. So.
Oh, wow. So you didn't have to fight anybody to get him to start eating this way, huh?
I never forced anybody to have to eat the way I wanted to. But being the cook in the kitchen, I was making the supper, I was making the meals. If they could choose to eat the delicious food I was making, great. If they wanted to go someplace else or make their own food, that's their choice. So that's the beauty about being the chef in the family, is that, hey, you can either eat the deliciousness or make yourself a PB&J if you felt so desired.
Okay. Now, I want to actually acknowledge and commend you for the fact that you're coming out and being honest about weight regain, because it's something that's kind of swept under the rug. Like, a lot of the keto community now likes to pretend like, well, you just go low carb keto, you lose the weight, and then just wipe your hands of that, and then we just keep looking forward. And a lot of people are in denial that either you can slip back into old eating habits pretty easily, or even if you're eating low carb keto foods, you can still overeat those and gain weight.
Yep.
So I think this is a really important topic that needs to come out now, especially as keto is becoming more popular. So I appreciate that you're being really honest about your struggle and how you've jumped back into it to get back to where you were.
Yeah, it was a hard pill to swallow after I joined Microsoft. So I joined Microsoft 5 years ago, and I went from being nearly at goal for 10 years to suddenly having to deal with a bunch of stress and having to, travel for sales, et cetera, et cetera. It became a lot more difficult to be keto on the road than in the past. Well, I never kind of left low carb. Dealing with all that sort of mess gave me a feeling of entitlement that, I'm on the road, I can eat 20 wings instead of 10 wings, or I can have the old 96er because it's on the corporate dollar as opposed to my having to pay for it. So yeah, and of course exercise went out the window because I was always traveling, and how do you work out in the terrible hotel gym? So yeah, so I gained about 110 pounds back from 2012 to 2017. And it took finally to getting kicked off the Harry Potter ride at Universal Studios to finally decide enough is enough. You can't continue this ride anymore because I know it'll bring you back to 400 pounds. Yeah. You need to make a change. So September 7th was a coming to Jesus moment in which I said, hey, enough is enough. I'm getting back to strict keto, tracking my macros, and getting back in the gym. So
yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Now, can we just go back a little bit? Like my degrees are in nutrition and psychology, and I think the psychology piece of this is so underappreciated in long-term behavior change. So what was going on in your mind? I gotta think it's just denial as you start to regain the weight. I'll even come out and be honest as well. So I lost over 60 pounds in the first 6 months of keto, kept it off, and it's been more than 3 years now for me. But things kind of crept up a little bit, and they would come up and down, and maybe about 15 pounds is where I'd got up to. And it's a state of denial. You're like, well, I'm still pretty close. I feel really good. This food is delicious. And I wasn't cheating that I'd gained the weight. I was just overeating, kind of like you.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And so share with us, what was going on in your mind at that point where you're just kind of like,
Yeah, so going from 225 to 260 to 270, you could, exactly like you did, rationalize it away. I'm bulking up, I'm lifting weights and all this, and that sort of self-rationalization. I can lose the weight anytime. I'm just waiting for X date, and all that stress that I'm dealing with will go away. And that date came and passed, and you feel more and more like a failure. And maybe just staying still and running that treadmill in which I'm not going to gain any more weight, and I'll just stay at 270 because that's healthy. And vacations came and went, and 270 became 280, 280 became 300, and I would consistently think I was motivated and tried to have a good run at it, but I don't think it took getting kicked off that ride, which was one of the things that initially spurred the original weight loss, was hating to get on plane flights and having to ask for extender belts and all these sorts of negative connotations that you have in your mind on why you think you need to lose the weight started re-happening. And that was really when I said enough is enough. I can't do this anymore. And then my wife started saying, hey, I think your sleep apnea might be coming back. And you might need to get a BiPAP machine, which I had given away the one that I had. And that sounded like, you know what? I'm moving towards that, place where death is the next step. So not to be too overly dramatic, but when you have sleep apnea as bad as I did, it didn't seem like I was that far away from it the first time. So
you had like a very specific, the getting kicked off the ride that was like your turning point, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It had to change. It felt like I was exactly in the same place. I couldn't rationalize what I was seeing in the mirror away anymore. Like,
Yeah.
oh, if I put the camera up here, my photos aren't too bad. Or, maybe I just need to wear slimming shirts or something.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had patients tell you all these sorts of ways to minimize sort of the pain or minimize the impact of that stuff. And I came to a point where I was done with all that and I was going to get it off. And it stuck in my head that I didn't want to be one of those statistics on recidivism. And, I didn't want to be the reason someone else failed on their low carb diet or keto diet because, well, if Kemp failed, if this success story failed, what hope do I have in keeping it off? And so I didn't want to be one of those anchors to somebody else's success, ultimately.
Yeah. Did you have anybody commenting either in person or social media that was like, Kent, you look like you're gaining the weight back? Like, how did you do that?
So I ended up not doing YouTube videos for quite a while just because of that fact. Was because, in 2014, they saw a 280-pound Kent and they knew that something had happened, that you didn't. Why am I watching this guy for low carb videos? Well, I don't want to be like him. If that's the way low carb looks, that's not what success looks like to me. So yeah, anytime you're online or whatever, you're going to hear that sort of thing. By and large, most people are awesome and very kind and gracious and more concerned than poking fun. But yes, obviously I heard people's concern about, hey, you're not doing as well as you used to. What's up? So
yeah. And then probably most people think like, well, you just must have gone back to eating carbs again. You must be cheating on your diet all the time.
You fell off the wagon, didn't you, Kent? And the answer was no. I'm still eating low carb. There's probably not more than 10 days in those 5 years that I really just decided, screw the diet. I'm going to eat how I want to eat and eat, high carb food. And the answer was no. I kept trying to do the right things. I kept trying to turn a knob, but that knob, what I didn't realize was I was turning it to 5. I really needed to turn it to 10. And that's ultimately what helped. So,
yeah. So, did you do anything different this time? Because you're following keto, so you got macros now, whereas Atkins isn't that way. So maybe let's do that first. Like, so people often want to know what's the difference between Atkins and keto.
Yeah, so one of the things I would say about keto, especially as I got into it, was one, there's a lot more tracking in keto than there is in Atkins. Atkins, as long as you eat 3 cups of vegetables or less, have your carbs underneath 20, you're pretty well golden. And there wasn't really a hard sort of tracking or foods matter in Atkins because a lot of the things are just eat liberally. With keto, obviously, you're trying to hit a specific macros each and every day. And what those macros are depends upon who's following keto. I was always more in the low carb, high fat side of keto than high fat, low carb side of keto, if you understand what I mean. There's people that do 80% fat on a day-to-day basis, have bulletproof coffee, etc., and all that stuff. That was less about what I was doing. It was more about real food, but still very much keto focused, very much high fat as well as low carb. So if that rant meant anything, what I'm ultimately saying is I think Atkins is a ketogenic diet, but I think the combination of the two makes it for a better combination than you just eating random generic keto without any sort of rules or any guidelines for what you should do.
So maybe we could say that Atkins is kind of what people call as lazy keto these days, right? Where you're not actually tracking what you're doing. You're just kind of following certain foods.
Exactly. Yeah. So turn up Atkins or Atkins strict or strict keto would be the better form of what I was actually doing. So yeah.
All right. And so how did you get inspired to do the high protein experiment?
So like I mentioned, my wife has been training with this personal trainer who is a strongman competitor. So, you see World's Strongest Man, in which they lift Atlas stones and cars and pull trucks and all that. Well, he's one of those guys. And my wife has been training with him for a year and a half up until last November. And I always saw that was one thing that I missed out in the first time I lost all the weight, because the first time it was cardio, cardio, cardio. It was run a marathon and keep training, and it was always a constant grind and never. So when I stopped that grind, there was nothing to sort of fall back on that to build upon someplace else. If you got bored with running, there was nothing else I could do. So starting November, I started lifting weights pretty heavily with this strongman competitor. And as I was building up those weights, I was seeing more and more muscle soreness prolonged throughout the week. So I would be sore from literally Monday to Saturday with the late onset muscle soreness, just because my muscles didn't have enough protein to recover from.
Okay.
So when Jimmy suggested this high protein thing, and I said, you know what? That sounds like something I could do, because I've always been one who could, one, love to eat meat. So that gave you sort of the freedom of a new macro that I could eat towards. And two, hopefully it would help with this muscle soreness that I kept dealing with. And the short answer is that week after, or that week during and the week after that, I had no muscle soreness at all that week. And I also hit PRs in the gym. So I was lifting every bit as hard, running every bit as hard, and not feeling the same soreness. And I said, oh, I think I hit something that I should have been doing from the start. So
interesting. Yeah. So just for people that haven't listened to the podcast, what was a protocol? What were your macros that you set up for yourself?
Yeah, so at that time of the experiment, I was, I believe, 258 pounds at 18 or 19% body fat. So that roughly made my lean body mass at 201, 203. So the protocol was 1.5 grams per pound of lean body mass, which made my daily protein target roughly 310 grams. And then it was a 3-to-1 grams of protein to fat. So that meant I could eat up roughly to about 110 grams of fat per day. So ultimately that worked out in terms of calories, 2,100 calories per day that I could eat when you tossed in the other 20 grams, and vegetables. So I did intend to eat the same. It was very much similar to, like, say, a very high protein Atkins induction meal plan, in which you had fibrous vegetables, broccoli, etc., and meat on top of that. Yeah. And because I focused upon very lean cuts of meat, like turkey breasts and chicken breasts, I had to add actually fat into my diet, like sour cream, cheese, etc., to bump up to even get to 110. I didn't hit over 100 grams of fat 5 of the 7 days, just because the leanness of the meat that I was eating.
Yeah, that's what I found as well. As I focused on, I didn't do as much poultry. I did more seafood because I knew it was even leaner. And then I had the fat to spend on, putting butter on my vegetables or salad dressings, or, avocado, a couple strips of bacon or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was really kind of the godsend, in the fact that because I was also doing intermittent fasting at that time, it was 300 grams of proteins over 2 meals. So one meal was typically over 200. And then the other one, I really had the freedom of what did I want to do? How much fat could I add? So was it bacon? Was it a fattier cut of steak, etc.? I really had the freedom to pick the protein for the second meal and make it delicious. So
okay. And did you have a goal of trying to hit your protein macro, or
Just because during Jimmy's week, it was he didn't think he could.
Yeah.
I wanted to prove it could be hit. So yes, I know Dr. Naiman said you didn't have to hit 300, or in my case, I didn't have to hit 300, more than 300. I wanted to prove that it could be done. Now, since then, I've since backed down my protein to roughly 255 grams. And doing 255 has been more natural. 300 seemed little more forced than I would have liked. So
how long did you keep up? How many days or how many weeks did you stay on that one that you just got first?
I am still doing it as of today.
Okay.
But instead of a 3-to-1 ratio, I'm more closer to a 2-to-1 ratio, protein to fat. Okay. So I've backed it down a little bit in terms of both the amount of protein as well as allowed a little bit more fat back into the diet.
Okay.
And again, I really have not seen, maybe 1 or 2 weeks in the last 12, have I actually seen any delayed onset muscle soreness at all. So
that's cool.
I'm really happy about that.
Did you do any qualitative? Did you check ketones, blood sugar?
Not during the test, which is something that came out obviously during the interview. But since then, I have been testing my blood glucose as well as my ketone levels, and I've done that with a high. So my fasting glucose is always awesome. It's always about 80 to 84. So I did a huge bolus of protein, 120 grams of protein powder, took it in, and then tested for the next 3 hours afterwards. And in that side of 3 hours, I only went up, 15 total millimoles of glucose over that time. And then it came right back down to 84. So blood glucose wise, the protein has had minimal effect. I've never gone over 100 on any test I've ever done. And then in terms of ketone levels, I've tested my ketones both morning and evening, and I've never been below 0.6 often. And the highest I've seen is 1.7.
Okay. And just because people might be curious too at my results in, I'll throw mine in as well here, because people are probably going to be like, what did you do? So my protocol, my 3-to-1 was about 180 grams of protein a day. My lean body mass is about 120. And so I had about 60 grams of fat that I could have. And I followed, I've talked to Dr. Naiman in person and, on various forums. And he always said, don't need to force the protein, just eat to satiety. So I think the first few days I was trying to hit that. And I backed down to probably somewhere around 120 to 150 was kind of a more doable amount for me. And I was checking for the first 4 days or so, the first week that I did it. My blood glucose went from, it started up in the early 90s, the low 90s. It actually crept down each day down to about 75 by the end of the week. And my ketones went up. That was the part that was surprising to me, because what I learned, and even the ketogenic conferences that I've been to for therapeutic ketosis for, like epilepsy, things like that, they're very mindful of protein suppressing ketosis. And if you look at the biochemistry of it, it's supposed to. But what I've since come to understand is that ketones are also made, if you're in a calorie deficit and your body's just burning fat, you're also going to have higher ketones from that. So therapeutic ketosis for children, you're not aiming for weight loss, right? So they're calorie stable. So then protein becomes a lot more important there. But when somebody's losing weight, their ketones can be higher at almost infinite protein. Probably not infinite, but we can't eat that much. So so that was a surprise, but it's a learning process for me. And I'm trying to remember now, I ended up doing a cyclic high protein, right? So maybe that's part of where the controversy was, that I didn't follow the protocol. Well, that's what Dr. Naiman had said too in forums I've seen him on, is that don't stick with this infinitely. You can cycle in and out. And so I was doing maybe 4 days on, a couple of days off, and cycling with that as it felt natural for me. And so over about 3 weeks, I lost about 7.5 pounds. And over the course of cycling in and out over a couple of month period, I was back down to the weight lower than I'd ever achieved on keto. So not only had I taken off all those pounds off that I had slowly crept up on,
Yep.
I was at a weight lower than I'd ever achieved the first, 6 months that I was on keto. So it worked really well for me. And
that's awesome, Carole.
Yeah, and
in terms of weight loss in that week, I lost, I think 7.5 pounds. And then I did an in-body test both before and after. And in-body is very a medically derived body impetus test in which they're sending electricity through your body. Same ones that the NFL uses. And I ended up losing 1% body fat in that week. So the majority of that 7.5 pounds was all fat tissue. So I had kind of thought going in, I'd lose mostly water. And the answer was actually I lost 4 pounds of fat and 3 pounds of water. So it was a good test. I was happy with the results.
Yeah, and one of the things I liked about it, I said on the podcast that it wasn't something I would have people start out with because it just feels like every other diet people have done. But after people have a solid foundation of being in ketosis, their body's really good at burning fat adapted, that I think it adds variety to have different techniques that you can do to get, either break through a plateau, a stall, or just to get your mind back right and course correct some mistakes, right?
Exactly. It's a hack in Dr. John Lemansky's terms, in which it gives you a chance to say, I'm doing something different, and to rejuvenate that same motivation. So if I can do this with my eating, what else can I do better or re-look at it? And it gives you a chance to reset some of those maybe bad behaviors that you might have brought back into your diet. So like if I was eating too many desserts, and desserts is the last thing that I would do, or eating too many wings, it got me to look at the protein to fat contents of wings, and therefore how many wings could one actually eat in a day and still hit your protein target. So yes, all good things.
Yeah, the other thing that I found, something like this too, I think it instills or brings in a spirit of discipline, right? And empowerment. Whereas, so my training back in my psychology and nutrition degree, like if I would have brought up the topic of discipline with diet, I would have been like booted out of school, because there was nothing where you need to let people be happy and healthy and not worry about food and diet and losing weight, like let go of all of that. Okay, so that whole thing just made me really fat and sick, and everyone else too. But so it's an interesting place to be, where feeling discipline with the diet and lifestyle and focusing on health is not a mental illness, and it's not because I hate myself, and it's not because I'm not good enough, right? It's because I feel awesome and great, and I have this calm and peace, and I am able to dial things in, and
I want to do great things, and therefore here's one more great thing that I can do. Just like going to the gym and working out, working with your diet is exactly the same as that. And to me, it seemed a lot more palatable to do that level of change than, say, the previous experiment of fasting, fasting for 7 days. I would imagine that would give you the same level of empowerment. Hey, I could stop eating voluntarily for 7 days and not kill myself. Perfect. I'm just not sure that level of empowerment is for me. This gave me that capability to say, hey, I had a target, I ate that same way, and look at all of these good things that came out of that.
Yeah. And you didn't hate yourself in the process or get low self-esteem or anything, right?
No.
That was part of my training, was that, if we put people on restricted diets, they're just going to hate themselves and have poor self-esteem. So just eat whatever you want and don't worry about it.
Yeah, that does not seem like a recipe for success.
Yeah.
That was kind of how I had the regain happen. So yes, no, that's probably not the right way.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. So was there anything else you were hoping I would ask about, or you wanted to talk about, you wanted to share?
I don't know your story as well, so you'll have to forgive me. I don't know how big of a role exercise plays in your weight loss? I mean, do you go to the gym? And for me, that's the piece that I always find that's missing in a lot of ketogenic talks, is that I've had people that say the exercise plan that I follow is unsustainable and therefore it's only going to lead to more failure in the future. And that's really never been my case. I've actually used that as motivation for keeping going. Oh, you doubt that I can do this? I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to do it every day this week, and we'll see what the result is. So that's been one of the things I like to talk about, is just simply the benefits of exercise, and seeing the changes that have happened with my wife in terms of going from, the standard everyday housewife in terms of growth and strength and all this, and to seeing her progress and with the strongman training really has, the same level of empowerment that we saw with the high protein. She's have seen that with her weight training. So yeah, if I have a hot button issue, it's why, you're eating this way. Awesome. Why not use your body the way, and see all the new benefits and gifts that the new body will give you. So.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I've, in my first part of my keto journey, I just was walking. So I had been, disabled after a car accident and had,
I saw that.
Yeah. Brain injury issues that made it so I was just laid out in bed with no energy at all. And so for me, just being able to get out of bed because I had so much energy and started walking just because oh my gosh, I can't stop. That was my first. So that was the only exercise I did. And I wouldn't even say that's exercise. It was just walking for 45 minutes. It wasn't, for exercise so much. And then I've always really liked weight training. I agree. It feels really empowering to do that kind of stuff. I'm on some medical restriction, unfortunately, for something that related to the car accident, issue with an artery in my brain right now. I can't do any weightlifting right now. So exercise plays a very negligible role in my life right now, but only not because I don't want to, but
I get it. I feel fortunate that, I can. And, I see my dad, who is dealing with his second knee surgery in a few weeks, and I had to buy a lift chair for him, that I want to live a life that leads me not to that path, in which I'm essentially laid up and due to inactivity and having my muscles waste away.
Yeah. And
if I'm given this great chance to do great things, why would I not? And, that it just feeds into, why I joined the National Guard, why I became a firefighter, and all. It's my way to give back too. So I have to be in a place that I can.
Sweet. Nice. Well, excellent. Kent, I so appreciate you being on here. I have one closing question for you.
Sure.
The meteors coming at the planet today. We're all gonna die. It's a guaranteed. What's your final meal gonna be?
It would have to be wings. It'd be buffalo wings with ranch sauce. That was the thing that convinced me that keto was the right way to go, and that would be the thing that would I'd eat with my wing sauce as the meteor's coming. So
that's awesome. You see that fiery ball in the sky while you're eating your fiery wings. Right?
Absolutely. The hotter the better.
I love it. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And again, I just appreciate your open and honesty. I think this is a topic that, really needs to get out there. I mean, for one, that we don't have to fear protein as much as people have been thinking we do, but then also just this whole topic of like weight regain, even though you're sticking with low carb foods.
It's not a death knell.
Yeah.
And that was my fear, was you hear this golden shot theory, and this is a way that, you had one shot at the brass ring and you had it and now you lost it. Can you do it again? And I'm happy to say that you absolutely can. So
yeah. Well, high fives. Way to be the example. And thank you so much for being here. If you guys have enjoyed this, give us a thumbs up. Well, you can only do one thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. We've got more interviews coming up for you. And we've got links down below to Kent's YouTube channel and other stuff too, to get a hold of him. And we'll put the podcast interview as well that we were both on. And hey, have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks again.
Thanks, Carole.